That day John Wayne was alone on the set. His hand found the wooden beam. His fingers traced the carved letters. Then he understood. And everything changed. The soundstage was empty. Late afternoon. November 1976. The film crew had wrapped for the day, leaving behind the skeletal remains of a western town, false front buildings, hitching posts, the perpetual dust that settled on everything between takes. John Wayne moved slowly through the space. At 69, every step carried weight. The cancer was there, though he didn't talk about it. The lung they'd removed 13 years earlier. The treatments. The cigarettes he'd finally quit. The knowledge that time was running out, measured now in films rather than years. He was shooting the shouldest. His last western. Maybe his last film, though he wouldn't admit that out loud. A story about an aging gunfighter dying of cancer, trying to find dignity in his final days. Art imitating life in ways that made the cast and crew uncomfortable. Wayne had stayed late to walk the set alone. He did that sometimes. Needed the quiet. Needed to remember why he'd spent 50 years doing this. Needed to feel the weight of all those characters, all those films, all those moments when he'd been the man others looked to for strength. His hand found the wooden support beam almost by accident. One of the old studio pillars that held up the soundstage roof. Scarred wood. Decades of productions. Paint and plaster, and the accumulated debris of make-believe worlds. His palm pressed flat against the surface. Rough grain. Splinters. And then his fingers found something else. Letters. Carved into the wood. Uneven. Hesitant. The handwriting of a child. Wayne stopped moving. His breath caught. The name read, Michael Morrison 1968. Michael Morrison. His birth name. The name he'd left behind when he became John Wayne. The name only family used. The name carved here, in a child's uncertain hand, 8 years ago. Wayne didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His mind worked backward. 1968. The shouldest wasn't filmed in 1968. That was, what was shooting here then? He'd done 3 films that year. None on this soundstage. But his son had visited sets. His youngest boy, John Ethan, would have been 6 years old in 1968. No. Ethan wouldn't have called him Michael Morrison. Ethan called him Dad. Wayne's fingers traced the carved letters again. Slower this time. The depth of the cuts. The way the M was larger than the other letters, the way a child writes when concentrating hard on getting it right. The way the whole name tilted slightly downward, as if the carver had been standing on tiptoes, reaching up. Then he saw it. Below the name. Smaller. Almost invisible unless you were looking for it. I was here. Did you see? Wayne's hand dropped. He took a step back. Stared at the carving like it had reached out and struck him. Memory arrived. Sharp. Unwanted. Undeniable. To understand what happened next, you need to understand 1968. John Wayne was at the height of his power. True Grit would come the following year, and win him the Oscar he'd chased his whole career. But in 1968, he was already an institution. The biggest box office draw in Hollywood. The man who defined American masculinity on screen. He was also a father who was barely home. 7 children across 3 marriages. Complicated relationships. Messy divorces. Child support payments and bitter custody battles, and the kind of family dysfunction that doesn't make it into fan magazines. One of those children was a boy named David. Not Wayne's biological son. The child of his second wife, Esperanza Bauer, from a previous relationship. But when Wayne married Esperanza in 1946, David was part of the package. 4 years old. Quiet. Watchful. The marriage lasted 7 years. Bitter years. Fighting. Alcohol. Accusations. When Wayne and Esperanza finally divorced in 1954, David was 12. Old enough to understand. Old enough to hurt. The custody arrangement was clear. David stayed with his mother. Wayne had visitation rights but rarely exercised them. He was busy. Always working. Always another film. Always another location shoot that took him away for months. David wrote letters. Wayne kept meaning to respond but never quite found the time. The letters eventually stopped coming. In 1968, Wayne was shooting a film at Paramount. Not this soundstage, but close enough. Word got around the lot when John Wayne was in town. Everyone wanted to see the Duke, including a 14-year-old boy who remembered when this man had been, briefly, something like a father. David Morrison, he'd taken his mother's maiden name after the divorce, showed up at the studio gates one afternoon. Told security he was there to see John Wayne. They laughed him off. "Kid, everyone wants to see John Wayne. Get lost." But David was persistent. He came back 3 days in a row. Finally, a production assistant took pity on him. Led him onto the lot. Pointed him toward the sound stages. "If you're quiet and stay out of the way, you can watch from the back." David found the stages. But Wayne wasn't there that day. He was on location. The PA had given the kid bad information, or Wayne's schedule had changed. Either way, David wandered the empty sound stages alone, looking for a man who wasn't there. At some point, no one knows exactly when, David found a pocket knife. Maybe his own. Maybe something left behind by a carpenter. And he found a wooden support beam in an empty corner where no one would see him. And he carved his stepfather's real name. Michael Morrison. The name the man had been born with, before Hollywood changed him into John Wayne. "I was here. Did you see?" David never found Wayne that day. He left the studio. Went home to his mother. Never tried to visit again. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. Wayne stood in front of that carved name in 1976 and realized what he was looking at. A message. A marker. A child's desperate attempt to be seen by a man who had stopped looking. He'd missed it. 8 years. That carving had been here the entire time, on a soundstage Wayne had probably walked through dozens of times since 1968, and he never noticed. Never stopped long enough to see what a 14-year-old boy had left behind. His hand went back to the wood. Fingers covering the name as if he could somehow reach back through time and make different choices. "I'm sorry," he said to the empty soundstage. His voice rough. The voice of an old man talking to a ghost. He'd built a career on being the man who always did the right thing. The hero. The protector. The father figure to a nation. But he'd failed at the one role that actually mattered, being a father to the children who needed him. The soundstage door opened. Don Siegel, the director of the shootist, stepped inside. "Duke? You still here? Thought you'd gone home." Wayne didn't turn around. "Don, what was filming on this stage in 1968? Siegel looked confused. 1968? Hell, Duke, I don't know. Why? I need to find out. Can you check the studio records? Sure, but you okay? Wayne's hand was still on the carved name. I need to find someone. Away from the cameras, Wayne made a choice no one expected. It took 3 days to track down David Morrison. Studio records showed the soundstage had been used for a television production in 1968. Some Western series. Long cancelled. But security logs from that week showed a minor incident. A teenage boy on the lot without proper credentials. No name recorded. Just a note that he'd been escorted out. Wayne hired a private investigator. Gave him everything he knew. David Morrison, age 14 in 1968, Mother Esperanza Bauer, last known address from the 1954 divorce papers. The investigator found him in 4 days. David Morrison, age 24. Living in Bakersfield. Working construction. Married 6 months earlier. His wife was pregnant with their first child. Wayne sat in his study at home, holding the investigator's report, staring at an address in Bakersfield. He could call. He could write. He could send money. He'd done that over the years, guilt checks that got cashed without comment. Or he could drive to Bakersfield. On a Thursday morning in December 1976, John Wayne got into his car, no driver, no assistant, no one from the studio, and drove 2 hours north to a small house on the edge of town. He sat in the car for 10 minutes before getting out, rehearsing what to say, discarding every version. What do you say to a son you abandoned? How do you apologize for 16 years of absence? He knocked on the door. A young woman answered. Pregnant. Early 20s. She stared at John Wayne standing on her porch and her mouth fell open. Is David home? Wayne asked. She couldn't speak. Just nodded and disappeared inside. David Morrison came to the door. Taller than Wayne remembered. Broader. A working man with calloused hands and paint-stained jeans. He looked at John Wayne and his face went carefully blank. Hello, David, Wayne said. Mr. Wayne. Not Dad. Not even Michael. Mr. Wayne. The formal distance of strangers. I found your carving. On the soundstage. From 1968. David's jaw tightened. That was a long time ago. I should have seen it sooner. You were busy. The words hung between them. Not accusatory. Just fact. The summation of 16 years in 3 syllables. Wayne reached into his jacket and pulled out something he'd brought from home. A photograph. Old. Faded. From 1948. Wayne and Esperanza and 4-year-old David at the beach. The boy sitting on Wayne's shoulders, laughing. I kept this, Wayne said. All these years. I know that doesn't. I know it's not enough. But I kept it. David looked at the photograph. His expression didn't change. Why are you here? He asked. Wayne took a breath. I'm sick. Cancer. I don't know how much time I've got. And I realized, there's a lot of things I never said. A lot of things I got wrong. And I can't fix most of them. But I wanted you to know what you carved on that beam. I was here. Did you see? I see it now. I'm sorry it took so long. But I see you, David. I see you. But what followed would stay with everyone who witnessed it, forever. David Morrison stood in his doorway looking at John Wayne, the biggest movie star in the world, the man who had taught America what a hero looked like. And saw something he'd never seen before. Regret. Real regret. Not the performed emotion of a character, but the raw, ugly truth of a man who had run out of time to make things right. My wife's name is Sarah, David said quietly. We're having a boy. Due in March. Wayne nodded. Congratulations. We're naming him Michael. The word hit Wayne like a punch. Michael. His real name. The name David had carved into wood 8 years ago. The name that connected them to something older than Hollywood, older than John Wayne the myth. Can I? Wayne's voice cracked. Started again. Can I ask why? David's face softened slightly. Just slightly. Because someone should carry that name forward. Someone should remember the man before the character. He paused. And because maybe if you're around, he should know his grandfather. Wayne's eyes filled. He didn't hide it. Didn't look away. Just let the tears come the way they did now, easier than they used to, age stripping away the armor. I'd like that, he said. I'd like that very much. They didn't embrace. Not yet. Too many years. Too much damage. But David stepped aside and gestured into the house. Sarah's making coffee. You want to come in? Wayne stepped across the threshold. Into David's small living room. Into the life he missed. Into the chance he didn't deserve but was being offered anyway. They talked for 3 hours. About David's childhood after the divorce. About the letters Wayne never answered. About the day David came to the studio looking for a man who wasn't there. About the carving. About forgiveness, though they didn't use that word. When Wayne finally left, as the sun was setting over Bakersfield, David walked him to his car. "The film you're shooting," David said. "The shootist. About the old gunfighter dying. That's you, isn't it?" Wayne nodded. "Yeah. It's me." "Then make it count," David said quietly. "Make the ending count." Wayne drove back to Los Angeles. The next day on set, he asked the prop master for something specific: a pocket knife. Small. The kind a boy might carry. In the final scene of The Shootist, the last scene John Wayne ever filmed, his character sits alone, preparing to face his death with dignity. On the table beside him, visible if you know to look for it, sits a small pocket knife. Wayne kept the carved beam. When the soundstage was demolished in 1982, he had that section of wood cut out and preserved. It hung in his study until he died in 1979. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Michael Morrison was born in March 1977. John Wayne held his grandson 3 weeks later, in a hospital room in Bakersfield, and wept openly. David brought his son to visit Wayne 17 times before the end. Every visit, Wayne would show the boy the carved beam hanging on his wall and say the same thing. "Your daddy left this for me. So I'd remember to look. So I'd remember to see." The knife from the Shootist set is now in David Morrison's home. Beside it, a photograph, 4-year-old Michael Morrison sitting on his grandfather's shoulders, laughing. Some circles close. Some names endure.